design, there's a rat trap there. Can everybody see it? Yeah. Okay? So in that rat trap there, I've got to be really careful because that will literally break your fingers. In that rat trap there, you have certain things which make up the rat trap. You've got the holder bar, that basically keeps the hammer from coming round and killing the mouse. You've got the spring, you've got the base, you've got the catch. But it's what you call irreducibly complex, right? So they say this has the appearance of design. Looks like it's been designed, but actually it's just thrown itself together through various tiny increments, which is what Charles Darwin taught. But here's the problem. There are within the cell, and not just the cell, but everywhere, things which are irreducibly complex. That means that you take one of those things away, and that fails to be a mousetrap. But if it can be proved that these things needed to come together in one go, then he says my theory is wrong. Now here, I'm just showing you the mousetrap as an example, but I know you're thinking, well, God didn't make the mousetrap. Well, look at what God made in a minute. But here is an example of irreducible complexity. Now, unless all those components come together spontaneously, are built together spontaneously, it isn't a mousetrap. For instance, if there's just a wooden base, but you want to call it a mousetrap because it's going to evolve into a mousetrap. So there's just a wooden base, and you hope that the mouse somehow trips over the wooden base and sprains its ankle, right? But no, don't worry, because it's evolving into a mousetrap. You know, and so eventually you get the spring. Well, what's the use of a spring unless you've got the holding bar there? Do you understand what I'm saying? Unless all those things are in place at exactly the same time, irreducible complexity, unless they're together at the same time, it's worth nothing. And so the problem with evolution is it says, well, these things come together over eons of time. Well, imagine some lizard that's kind of growing wings, but the wings aren't quite wings yet, and they're in this in-between phase for millions of years, so that they're going to be picked off by other predators. Because, you see, well, it's the same problem with the mousetrap. It shows design because it is designed. It's as simple as that. That's the logic. It shows design because it is designed. Now let's have a look at the mousetrap actually working. Kevin? Let's have a... do you want to just come round and see the mousetrap in full operation? Here we have the mousetrap. Now then, can we see there? Without all these pieces in place simultaneously, it's not a mousetrap. But when they come together in one go, okay, Kev, whoa, you have something that works superbly, right? This is, does anybody know what that is?
Yeah, a bacteria motor.
Yeah.
To push itself along.
Correct. It's called a flagellum, right? A flagellum. Now, basically it's just a bacteria that's pushed around the cell, but it moves around in goodness knows how many different directions, and it has within it irreducible complexity, just the same as the mousetrap. It has within it design. It has an outboard engine. It is an outboard engine. You can see there the motor. The motor's driven by acids, basically, and it spins around there, and you've got various couplets. You can see the couplets, you've got an angle there, and you've got the tail, which, if you take any one of these pieces away, it is no longer an outboard. It can't work. It has no function whatsoever. It is irreducibly complex. But Charles Darwin says, well, my theory shows that things can just add on a little bit, and a little bit. Well, when it comes to things like the flagellum, and there are thousands of examples of this, thousands, unless all of these parts came into existence simultaneously, it had no function or purpose whatsoever. And of course, this is the problem. Back in Charles Darwin's day, 150 years ago, when he looked at a cell under a microscope, what did he see? He just saw a blob. Today, 150 years later, when we look at a cell, we realize that a cell is so full of design. The evolutionists would say it is so full of the appearance of design. And that's the difference between the two. We all believe that there's design in this. One says there's the appearance of design, and the other says no, it's not just appearance, it is design. And this is irreducibly complex. Take any one of those things away, and it fails to work. Now, does everybody understand that? Because that is very, very important. Evolution cannot simply build these motors over thousands and millions of years. They simply don't work. They have to come into existence together.
I was just going to say, what about the eye?
Yes.
Because
Well, Charles Darwin said that the eye, he admits that the eye doesn't seem to look as though it was evolved. It's got too much design in it. It's not just the eye, folks, it's the entire body. Trillions of cells, every cell has within it such intricate design, but they just put that word appearance of design. You see?
The eye, especially in the animal kingdom, again, the eyes are used for the environment you live in.
Yeah.
You know, the eyes that revolve and turn
Exactly.
around, and you'll notice that where these creatures are living,
Yeah.
they need that sort of
Absolutely.
sight.
But again, Genesis explains that. It explains that species can adapt within its kind. There's no problem there. Again, you'd be amazed how few atheists know that the Bible teaches that. All right, just go on one, Kev. Okay, it is worth seeing. Some of you may have seen this.
And that is DNA, or biological information. In fact, scientists, I'm sure you read about this not long ago, finished mapping the human genome. And it was very interesting. The human genome is the blueprint inside every cell that explains how to build all the proteins in your body. And I love the words of President Clinton when they announced this breakthrough. They'd actually mapped the human genome. He said, "Today, we are learning the language in which God created life." And that's exactly true. DNA is quite literally language. It's language. Inside every one of your 100 trillion cells in your body is this famous double helix of DNA. And if you were to open it up and stretch it out, it would stretch out 6 feet long inside every one of your cells. And it is encoded with a 4-character chemical alphabet that precisely spells out the assembly instructions for all of the thousands of different kinds of proteins out of which your body is constructed. In fact, DNA is the most efficient information storage system in the universe. Our science cannot come anywhere near replicating the ability of DNA to contain information. I'll give you an example. This will blow your mind. Picture a teaspoon of peanut butter. You know what that looks like? A teaspoon of peanut. Now imagine that's not peanut butter. Imagine that is pure DNA. How much genetic information could that teaspoon of DNA hold? Just 1 teaspoon of DNA could hold all of the precise assembly instructions for all of the proteins of every one of the 1,000 million species of animals that have ever existed on the planet, and still have information left over for all of the information in every book ever written. That is how efficient DNA is in storing information. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Now, how does DNA point toward God? Well, think about this. How many people saw the motion picture Contact? Anybody ever see that movie? Wow, more than I thought. It didn't do that well. That's kind of surprised. Well, the movie Contact is based on a book by Carl Sagan. And in this movie and in the book, scientists are trying to find out, is there intelligent life anywhere on the planet? And so they have these radio telescopes that are scanning the sky for any kind of sign of life. But all they receive is static, just random sounds. And they make the very reasonable conclusion that there's no intelligence behind these random sounds. That's just a sound that is out there in the universe. But then one day, they begin receiving a transmission of prime numbers. Prime numbers are numbers that are divisible only by themselves or by the number 1. So they start getting these numbers coming at them. And the scientists reason, and again, this is quite rational, they reason it is far too improbable that there be natural causes behind a string of numbers like that. This wasn't disorganized static. This was information. This was a message with content. And from that, they concluded there must be an intelligence behind these numbers. Carl Sagan himself said, look, the receipt of a single message from space would be enough to know that there's intelligence out there. But, friends, what is DNA? It is a message with content. It is a language. Just like English uses a 26-letter alphabet, DNA uses a 4-letter chemical alphabet. In fact, inside every cell of the human body is as many words as you would find in thousands of editions of your Sunday newspaper. It's the specific, detailed, written instructions for how to build all of the proteins in the human body. Where did that come from? If a single message from space is enough for us to conclude there must be an intelligence behind that, then what about this vast amount of information that's contained in the DNA of every animal on the planet? Nature by itself can't produce information. It can produce patterns. You know, if you're walking down the beach and you see ripples in the sand, what's your conclusion? Well, that nature, the waves, were coming up on shore and created this pattern. Nature can produce patterns, no problem. But if you're walking down the beach and you see John loves Mary and a heart with a arrow through it, you wouldn't conclude that the waves created that. Why? Because that's information with content. Nature doesn't do that. Nature produces patterns. It doesn't produce information with content. And whenever we see written information like that, whether it's in a book, whether it's in a newspaper, whether it's in a computer code, we know there is intelligence behind it. And when we look at DNA and we see these written instructions for the assembly of proteins in our bodies, I believe we are looking at some of the most powerful evidence that there must be an intelligence behind life. As King David wrote in Psalm 139, "For you, God, created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." And there's plenty of evidence from 21st century science to know that full well. As one of the leading experts in the molecular world, Dr. James Tour of Rice University, he is on the cutting edge of nanotechnology. He files a new patent about once a week. I had lunch with him recently. It's unbelievable what they're building on the molecular. He builds molecules for a living. That's what he does. He creates molecular machines. He says, very hard work. That's what he does. This is what he said, quote, "I stand in awe of God because of what he has done through his creation." He said, "Only a rookie who knows nothing about science would say that science takes away from faith." He said, "If you really study science, it will bring you closer to God." This is from one of our greatest scientists of our generation. In other words, science, when done right, points toward God.